Is there really a magic indicator out there that can predict the future? Well, let's go ahead and check this indicator out. I was on TradingView and I happened to stumble upon an indicator called the next pivot. And what it does, and we can actually put this, so we put it on the chart, is it has a prediction of where it potentially could go. So here is a prediction on Apple. So this is the daily Apple chart. So let's see what this thing actually did on this prediction on this specific candle on November 18th. Okay, so far so good. And wow, it actually was almost perfect. And so that was actually pretty cool. Okay, so let's be real. There isn't a magic indicator out there, but this thing is actually really cool. And so what it does is, so that was actually a perfect trade, perfect call right there. But naturally, this thing is going to repaint everything, right? So every single day you put this on the chart, it's going to repaint a different line in a different. So I actually found this. I thought it was pretty interesting. And so let's just go to today. So today it's predicting that it's actually Apple's going to shoot all the way up here to all-time highs. I'm imagining if Apple comes down a little bit, this line will be completely different. And what I mean by that is, let me show you this, what it was predicting here. It still was actually not terribly, this actually wasn't too bad here, but let's just go back to where it was down here. And yeah, so it was predicting that, hey, it's going to go, it's going to break. Now, while there isn't anything, I guess, completely wrong with that, you can definitely get a false, you can't just be relying on this thing, as it is really cool. This isn't something that you're just going to only look at. I do, however, find it interesting. And, just looking at some of the, basically some comments about it, and what people were saying, some people were actually wanting to just use this and use it alone. Guys, don't do that. Don't just rely on something like this. You can't just there is no magic indicator. This isn't going to work every single time. That Apple trade was really cool, but it's not going to be perfect, right? And so just some of information about this. I believe it uses the zigzags with 250 bars. There's a bunch of other specific things of how it's calculating. I was looking at the code. I thought it was pretty interesting. But again, this isn't something that you're going to trade and only rely on this, right? So you don't want to do that. Great stuff. Yeah, I mean, the author got some pretty good comments, and I'm not knocking the author at all. I think it's really cool. I think it's something that, potentially could be useful. Maybe get your eyes focused on a potential target, and things like that. But I wouldn't rely on anything aside from that, because this is not going to be reliable. Just because every single day, and you put it on. So if you leave this on this chart here, this actually will stay. And so that is pretty cool. So if you don't mess with this chart, I believe this will just stay like this, right? And so and then you can actually see what the forecast was. But if you're messing around, if you switch to a different time frame, and the next day or whatever, it's going to completely change. But again, pretty cool, a pretty interesting tool. There is no magic indicators out there. Let's not think that there is. But how you could use something like this, I wouldn't really rely on it all that much. Again, like I said, I think a target would be cool. I think that was pretty interesting. And because something like this, can open up your eyes to potential targets. And this is actually not a terrible prediction if Apple would continue to go up here, because I think Apple could bounce off of right here. So it could if it breaks all-time highs. Let's actually do this horizontal line. And so if it could break the all-time highs, I definitely could see it coming up here around 280. So again, not a bad prediction. But again, I wouldn't just rely on this thing and this thing alone. I think on the daily is pretty interesting. We can look at a couple more. Let's see what it says the S&P 500 is going to do. So the S&P, and actually this is actually not a bad analysis right here, because there is a lot of stuff happening down here, and then it could rocket back to the upside. It's actually what a lot of folks are saying right now. So this is actually not a bad prediction. I'm sure a couple days ago it was probably saying something different, but as of right now, this is actually a pretty good idea of what S&P could possibly do. Let's look at a couple more. Let's see what it did on Tesla. So it thinks Tesla is going to continue to ride up. And honestly, I agree with that. There was a pretty interesting day yesterday, a very interesting candle. But yeah, so pretty cool. Again, I would never just rely on this and this alone, but it's a really cool. It actually opens your perspective. Probably what I would do is just keep this up here on TradingView, and then just turn. If you have if you're looking at your daily analysis and you're checking out a chart, let's look at one more, Walmart. I'm curious what it says on Walmart, because Walmart has been just drastically going. Yeah, that's actually not a bad prediction either. So again, this is pretty cool in itself. But what I would recommend if you would ever use this indicator, again, it's come up. If you want to use it, you come up here to indicators, go to community, and props to the next pivot. It's called the next pivot, and props to KIOSEFF. So this is the guy that created this. So if you're watching this, props to you. Really cool. But again, never just rely on one indicator, but this thing is actually pretty interesting. And so this is something that you could definitely use just as the top, maybe at the start of your top down analysis, maybe on a daily chart, put this up here. I would think that on the minute chart, it's a little bit wonky. Yeah, so it could be probably a little bit crazy. I think on the daily though, this thing's actually pretty good. This is actually pretty good on the daily chart. Just because it's definitely showing some levels. It's showing some levels that it could potentially bounce. It could show potential levels that it could go to. So I actually really like that. That's actually really cool. This actually might be something that I would just keep up here when you're on your daily chart. Just check it out that day, and just to kind of just get your eyes open to where maybe some levels are. But that's really all I would use it for. I wouldn't really trust this line. So like I said, Apple was saying it's going to, and again, this potentially could, though I'm not saying it won't, but this was, you're not just going to say, all right, well, I am going all in because the line says to go up. We're going to go up, right? So you're not going to do that. Apple could definitely continue to go sideways, and this thing will change as it does that. But this is an interesting perspective, and a potential move that could happen. But again, if Apple starts falling off, it'll probably change its perspective and go to the downside, which again, as traders, you should be doing that. As traders, you shouldn't only have, just one, like, okay, well, Apple's going all-time highs, and then Apple comes down here. Apple drops, it continues to drop, and you're still saying, well, we're just in a little pullback, right? So let me actually move this right here. So this is what happens with a lot of traders, right? And so they'll get in there, maybe their call options right there, and then Apple dips, right here. So like, all right, well, I'm gonna add to my position. Well, then Apple continues to go down, like, well, I'm gonna keep adding, and then as this continues to go down, as this continues to to decay with your options, say you have a 60-day option, right? And as your options continue to decay, you are averaging down, right? But if you don't get this bounce, if you don't get the bounce that you need, you are losing. You're going to be losing a lot, right? You'll probably lose that entire position. And again, I speak from experience. This does happen to people. This definitely happens, and that's just something that you should always, be focused on, right? So you don't just want to keep averaging down. Averaging down is a great strategy in itself, but you don't just want to, if you have this bias, if you see this line, right? So everybody's saying, well, if you see this line right now, it's like, all right, well, I'm going to go, if this even goes down here, I'm just going to trust this line, right? Well, you can't do that, obviously. If it starts to trickle down here and it comes to this point right here, well, I think your bias should change. We could probably see a break, maybe a little retest, and then I'll come back down there. Or if it stops here and it just goes sideways, then the new perspective will be, okay, well, we can maybe see a pop right there. And so, but you can't just, it's not just gonna go straight up. Nothing will ever go straight up. So that's just my 2 cents with using a tool like this. I think it's great. I think it's a cool little tool. I initially thought it was just a gimmick, as most indicators are. There's a lot of gimmicks out there, but this is actually pretty. The more I see it, the more I understand it. I think it could actually be semi-useful. I'm not gonna give it a full stamp of approval because you never want to just rely on something like this alone. But I think if you're just trying to get some analysis, this could be something that you could use, and just to kind of get a gauge of what what the market could potentially do. But don't just fully rely on something like this. Make sure that you have an open mind, because you don't ever want to just follow a line on a chart. You never want to do that. But again, something like this definitely could be helpful, just seeing where it potentially could go. So all right, well, I thought hopefully this was interesting enough. I thought this is a pretty interesting tool, and it's a tool that I think that I might even start throwing on the chart on the daily when I'm up here, and just to kind of get a perspective of what could be happening. And things like that. All right, guys, that's it for this video. If you liked it, make sure you give that quick little thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already, and I appreciate it. We are drastically growing this channel, and I appreciate every single one of you guys. If you could leave just a quick little comment about this indicator, if you want more information about it. It's not mine. It's not my personal one. You can go grab it on TradingView right now for free, 100% free. And yeah, so I just thought this was an interesting tool and an interesting way that you could, possibly use it.